In the early 2010s, no company really had a hold on internet culture the way that BuzzFeed did. BuzzFeed was the center of almost everything that was going viral. Remember that dress that everyone was debating the color of for like a whole entire week? BuzzFeed started that. Remember that trend where everyone was putting rubber bands over watermelons to make them explode? Well, BuzzFeed started that. You know those videos where people will compare things that are like super cheap to things that are wildly expensive? Well, BuzzFeed started that too. Whether you hate or like BuzzFeed, one thing that you cannot deny was that they really started a lot of viral waves. Because even though their influence is still relevant today, their brand is on the verge of bankruptcy. Their YouTube channel that once had over 20 million subscribers has lost over 500,000 subs in the past 2 years, and their videos only get tens of thousands of views, which is pretty awful. All of the talent that once made up the brand has now left to do their own endeavors and has completely abandoned the company. Their drop in revenue has been so intense that they've had to fire hundreds of employees just to save money. At one last attempt to save the company, they went public at $10 a share, but their share price has dropped so horrendously that at one point it was at 67 cents a share. Now the company is burdened with debt that they can't pay back, and it's only a matter of time before they have to file for bankruptcy. How did a company that was earning hundreds of million dollars in revenue and was one of the biggest voices on the internet suddenly lose their reputation so fast and lose all of their money? Let's cut the bullshit and get right into it. Jonah Peretti was just a typical grad student who had no incentive or idea to start a company at all. He got his degree from the University of California in Santa Cruz and now is getting his master's at MIT. Jonah was bored one night, procrastinating doing his homework, and decided to do some trolling. You see, it was at this time that Nike launched the Nike ID shop where you could customize your very own pair of shoes. You could customize the color patterns and get certain messages embroidered in the shoes. So Jonah thought it would be funny to get the word sweatshop designed on the sneakers. This obviously was a reference to how Nike used sweatshop labor to produce their products, which was a pretty big controversy at the time, and still low-key is, but it's not really as talked about. But back then, they were dealing with a ton of lawsuits on the matter, so it was a lot more open. However, pretty soon after Jonah submitted this order, Nike emailed him back and canceled his order, saying that his design violated their guidelines. But Jonah emailed them back saying that his design violated none of those terms because, well, it technically didn't. And soon enough, this started a hilarious back and forth exchange between Jonah and the people at Nike over this very silly shoe design idea. Now, this was back in 2001 before the idea of going viral was really a thing. But Jonah was about to experience that for the very first time. Originally, Jonah just sent this email exchange to his friends to get some laughs, but then those friends sent it to more friends. This started an entire domino effect where a local blog company actually picked it up and posted it. And then legit news outlets started to report on it as well, like The Guardian, Time, and The Independent. It got to the point where Jonah was on NBC and debated one of Nike's spokespersons. The experience was so surreal that Jonah posted his own blog about it. The whole roller coaster of events really sparked an interest for Jonah. This was around the time the internet was starting to become popular, but also was still pretty new. Like, to put it blatantly, everyone was still really stupid. Like, a lot of people still really fell for a lot of those Nigerian prince scam emails. Like, back then, your data was super easy to steal, and the sad part is that it's still pretty easy to steal today. I mean, literally last year, it was reported that nearly every single one of American social security number was stolen by hackers. Back then, it was nearly impossible to protect your data, unlike today, which is good because we have Aura, which is the sponsor of today's video. I gotta be real with you guys, one of the main reasons why I do not say my full name on the internet all the time is because I am very scared of weirdos taking my information. I constantly get calls from phone numbers that have no business calling me. I constantly get text messages from really sus numbers. And don't even get me started about the amount of spam emails that flood my business inbox. But thankfully, Aura takes care of all of that. Aura is a service that protects your identity and your info from weirdos on the internet. What they do is that they reach out to all of those spam and sus info websites and request to get your information removed from them. This way, you don't have to spend all of your free time constantly trying to get all of your info taken down from these websites. And if you don't think it works, well, they quite literally give you updates in real time on how many websites they got your data removed from, as well as letting you know which specific sites have your data. After I signed up with Aura, I finally stopped getting all of those weird ass phone calls and text messages. Because quite frankly, I'm really sick of my voicemail inbox being flooded with messages about how my vehicle's warranty has expired or some bullcrap. Or weird ass text messages constantly asking me to confirm my address because my UPS package wasn't delivered properly, knowing damn well I didn't even order anything. It's honestly just a really giant relief and saves me so many headaches. Because if these guys get your data, they can really use it for bad things. If you're a fan of this channel, then you probably would realize that I don't really do a lot of sponsors often, because honestly, if I do a sponsor, I want to be for something that's actually worth buying. I basically begged these guys to actually sponsor my videos because I really do like what they do. Using Aura has genuinely improved my life for the better. My data has been safer than ever, and I've improved my credit score because I've actually been using their credit score tracker, which helped me get this apartment. And I've been really taking advantage of the VPNs by watching shows overseas. I genuinely think it's worth the money to invest in something like Aura because it really goes a long way. You don't really realize how much you need something like this until it's too late. So make sure that you use the link in my bio to protect your data, or the one on screen right here. It would mean the world if you guys would use the link, because honestly, it helps support a company that I really like and helps support my channel. Thank you, Aura, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it. Now, when the internet was starting to get popular, the way that people shared media and what really captured people's attention was starting to change, and Jonah wanted in. In 2006, he would officially form the BuzzFeed company. Trying to kind of almost recreate what he experienced, BuzzFeed was essentially a viral content lab. Now, at first, BuzzFeed made no original content at all. Their main mission actually was trying to share what was going viral, kind of being like the middleman for viral and trending things. Originally, BuzzFeed had an instant messaging client called BuzzBot, which would share you links to whatever the hottest thing was on the internet that day. But this wasn't really scaling the company at all. So it was time for them to make their own stuff. They started making what would soon be their signature Listicles, which essentially were article lists. These were pretty lighthearted and silly little lists that were meant to give you a quick little laugh. But this was really catering to a new form of entertainment that was called the bored at work genre. This was meant to give entertainment to people who just kind of wanted something really quick to look at for a couple minutes. Big media like television or movies or books were designed to keep your attention for hours at a time. But this genre was meant for small little moments, like when you're on your lunch break, or when you're online for something, or when you're taking a dump. It was meant to really fill in those small voids of boredom, and it was pretty genius, because not a lot of people were really thinking into that demographic. Now, this was pretty fresh off of the dot-com boom, which was essentially the rise of internet businesses and startups. So a ton of new websites and concepts were still very fresh for the taking. BuzzFeed was playing really well into trends unlike anybody else. But in its first couple of years, it was really a gimmick website. Like, it got a lot of users and some really decently sized investments, but it wasn't really taken that seriously as an actual brand. BuzzFeed was really a side project for Jonah because a lot of his main focus was really on Huffington, which was a news media company that Jonah also co-founded, which had a lot of potential at the time. Huffington was making a lot more money and more opportunities, so that was really where most of his work was going into. So meanwhile, BuzzFeed was being put on the back burner. But in 2011, Huffington was sold to another company for $315 million, which sounds pretty awesome. You think Jonah made like a lot of money from this as a co-founder, but not nearly as much as you think. In reality, he only made between $5 to $10 million, which is a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but when you look at the actual amount of money that the company was sold for, he got such a small percentage of the pie. But hey, at least now he was a millionaire with a lot more time on his hands. So he decided to put all of his new attention into BuzzFeed. Jonah started to hire more and more creatives and more writers to really elevate the content of the BuzzFeed website. More trending topics, more silly memes, more listicles. The website was now starting to really grow an audience of people that were really invested into internet culture. Every year, they were doubling their audience. Even though it wasn't ginormous, it was still pretty amazing progress. Jonah knew that this company could do much better and bigger things. So he recruited Ben Smith, who was a pretty popular and well-respected political journalist. He was now the editor-in-chief of the BuzzFeed news banner. This was a very unexpected and confusing decision. BuzzFeed was kind of a silly little website, so why would they get someone super political involved in their company? This decision obviously was very inspired by Huffington Post's success. Jonah wanted BuzzFeed not to just be entertainment, but also to be a news outlet, to have silliness and substance, which was the thing that helped them grow the business. For one, the website was the very first news source to actually break the news of John McCain McCain endorsing Mitt Romney for the 2012 election, which is a pretty insane accomplishment. To be one of the first people to announce a political candidate, that's pretty crazy. And that same year, they would make their greatest move yet, BuzzFeed video. In 2012, it was very apparent that YouTube was going to be the next big thing. YouTube was the host of everything that was going viral. Videos with millions of views were exploding every single day. And not just that, but individual creators were really making a name for themselves. The success of creators like Smosh, Nigahiga, and Ray William Johnson was honestly inspiring a lot of other people to make their own content and make it their job. YouTubers were becoming the next big celebrities. And it was at this point that people were now starting to make actual money from it, and it could be seen as an actual job. But most importantly, it also could be seen as a business. BuzzFeed knew that this was going to be the next big move if they really wanted to be the host of everything going viral. Now, originally their YouTube content was essentially just video versions of their listicles, which worked. If you look back at their old videos now, you would think they're very cringy, and you're probably wondering how the fuck people watch this. It was not the same back then. That type of content flourished in YouTube. BuzzFeed knew how to play the game. They posted on their YouTube channel every single day, getting millions of views, and within their first year, they got 1 million subscribers, which is fucking insane. Because again, BuzzFeed already knew how to play the game. They knew what was going viral, and they knew what the people wanted. The channel was already doing great, but what really helped accelerate BuzzFeed into a new level was the fact that they started making skits and their new form of content where people would try things. Skits like if Disney princesses were real, sex before versus after kids, if sex were honest, racked up tens of millions of views. I mean, skits are still popular now, but this specific type of skits were really the backbone of YouTube back in the day. It was the main form of humor that generally required a decent amount of talent and creativity to really flourish. But the content of where people try certain things really took BuzzFeed to a whole new level. Now, the theme of this was to basically get certain people to try new experiences that were new or unique, or uncomfortably hilarious. And BuzzFeed did this in like many ways. Like people who hate cats meet kittens, exes kiss for the first time since they break up, Mexican people try Taco Bell for the very first time. These types of videos crush on YouTube and got so many views. And that's mostly for 3 main reasons. One was the high quality production. Now, before even launching the first ever YouTube video on the channel, BuzzFeed essentially opened an entire studio just for YouTube videos, because they knew this was the future, and again, they were right. In that era, there actually was a very big market for very high quality production content, stuff that looked like it took a lot of money and effort to make. They were the first to release what I like to call corporate content, where essentially a company releases high production content under their brand name, and they release the content under the brand rather than through an individual. Channels like Vox, College Humor, and even Ray William Johnson at one point were all trying to replicate this. And a lot of them were very successful. Professionally well-made videos were really starting to hit the internet because it really impressed a lot of people. The nice studio, the quality cameras, the fancy special effects really made BuzzFeed look like they knew what they were doing. And again, they did. Even though a lot of their videos also had that raw, authentic style that made a lot of other YouTubers blow up as well. They had the perfect blend of both in one package. Now, the second reason was because a lot of BuzzFeed's ideas were very unique and timeless. When you look back at the format some of these videos had, like X's handcuffed for 24 hours, $11 versus $306 steak, we ate like Donald Trump for a day, this isn't really too far from some of the stuff that you see on YouTube today. The idea of people doing very silly or crazy stunts on YouTube for views is a timeless concept that we will probably see forever. Whether you hate BuzzFeed or like BuzzFeed, one thing that you have to admit was that they are very ahead of their time with their ideas. I mean, just look at some of their older content. Lots of YouTubers today are basically recreating this. The hilarious reactions of something like Americans trying British food for the very first time is timeless. But the third and the biggest reason that BuzzFeed took for granted was the talent. You see, the real thing that helped take these videos to the next level was also the people that actually starred in them. Over the years, fans actually liked a lot of the specific people that were frequently in the videos over and over again. And a lot of these people basically had their own specific and unique fan bases. The best example of this was when BuzzFeed dropped the video Men Try On Women's Underwear, and this was a hit. With over 20 million views, the concept was brilliant, but the fans also just loved the actual guys that were in this video. OMG, the reactions to the thongs and boy shorts were the best. OMG, Keith laughing at his own butt killed me. Eugene is so hot, just saying, we were all thinking it. It was obvious that these guys were really the star of the show, so BuzzFeed gave them an entire series on their own, the Try Guys. As a group, these guys were unstoppable, and everything they did was hilarious. Each of them had their own unique personality traits that made them so unique. Keith was the loud and high energy comedic backbone. Eugene was the cool and confident creative. Zach was the nerdy but also relatable one. And Ned was the guy who wouldn't shut the fuck up about his wife. Which didn't age well now, but back then it was a very, very likable thing about him. If you go to BuzzFeed's most popular uploads, you'll see that a lot of them were really from the Try Guys. Like, these videos were getting tens of millions of views. It's crazy. BuzzFeed started giving tons of people their own series. Like Worth It starring Steven and Andrew, where they compared extremely cheap foods to extremely expensive foods. Each of these videos also being pretty damn successful. They continued pumping out more and more content on their channel. By the end of 2014, BuzzFeed was a media giant, earning more than $100 million in revenue. In 2015, they received a $200 million investment from NBC. It seemed like they were unstoppable. That was until 2016. In 2016, BuzzFeed had a very noticeable shift in brand and tone. They were trying to take more initiative to become more inclusive. And the way they did that was by trying to make content that was specifically relatable to all races and ethnicities. Content like 6 signs you were raised in an Asian household and 17 struggles that all suburban black kids knew was pretty genius when you think about it. After all, the one thing that everyone can relate to is having a race of some kind. It's a funny way to make things relatable. But the thing was that it shifted from trying to bring other groups up to then bringing other groups down, specifically white guys. In the beginning of 2016, they posted the video 36 Questions Have for Men, which essentially was a bunch of questions that women had for men. Conceptually, it sounds pretty funny if it was done right, but it was actually one of the worst things ever. Every single question asked basically had the tone that every single guy was evil and a sexual predator.
In what world does no mean yes?
No means no.
Why do you say that women are too emotional to be leaders?
Then justify catcalling by saying men just can't control themselves.
Why do you think that just because you're nice to me, I owe you my body?
Why do you feel like it's okay to harass women or make offensive comments about women, but when somebody does it to your sister, it's not okay?
How does it feel to interrupt me when I'm in the middle of making a point?
The video as a whole was just really stupid, honestly, and you probably do remember this video all for the wrong reasons. And BuzzFeed had other videos in this format too, like 24 questions black people have for white people, 9 questions Native Americans have for white people, 26 questions Asians have for white people. The approach of all of these was kind of just assuming that all white people were racists, which just made BuzzFeed look really dumb. But instead of maybe taking the criticism, they again further doubled down on it. That same year, they posted the video Women Try Manspreading for a week, where essentially they recreate how guys will manspread by spreading their legs open as wide as possible to take up multiple seats. But the thing was that they heavily exaggerated it. Like, it got to the point where they were just laying down across all seats and being extremely rude on public transportation. BuzzFeed was making it clear that they were anti-white guy, and nothing really made this more clear than when one of the senior writers just straight up said this. Would you like to write long form for BuzzFeed Canada? Well, you can. We want pitches for your Canada-centric essays and reporting. BuzzFeed Canada would particularly like to hear from you if you are not white and not male. Last thing, if you're a man upset that we are looking mostly for non-white, non-men, I don't care about you. Go write for McLean's. White men are still permitted to pitch. I will read it. I will consider it. I'm just less interested because, men. White men get huffy when you don't actively encourage white men to do stuff because white men think they're out everything. Giving ignored voices preferential treatment is not racism against white people, is an attempt to fix all of history. Haha, anyway, ban men, literally throw them all in the garbage. I am getting pitches from white men that start with sorry, I'm a white man. That doesn't actually help your case, this isn't about you. Being inclusive to other cultures is definitely a good and important thing to do, but the way that you don't accomplish that is by bringing other races down. It just makes you look childish and stupid, and that's basically what BuzzFeed kind of looked like. This was definitely one of the first things that started BuzzFeed's downfall, but it was not the main thing despite what a lot of people think. BuzzFeed did have a noticeable decrease in searches after this, but it's not like as if they weren't a successful company still. Even after the whole dilemma, they still were the dream place to work. They still had tons of successful projects. They had the side channel Tasty, which was full of fun recipes. They had BuzzFeed Celeb, which was full of celebrity interviews that always got tons of views. And we cannot forget about BuzzFeed Unsolved, which was a series where they looked at, well, unsolved mysteries. It was hosted by Ryan and Sean, who really really gave the show tons of life. These videos got tens of millions of views, and it was one of BuzzFeed's biggest series yet. And considering they launched this after the whole anti-men dilemma, it still was obvious that they had some gas in the tank. And it's not like as if their main channel content was doing bad all of a sudden either. During BuzzFeed's peak, it was the dream place to work at. If you were someone that was aspiring to be in the entertainment industry in some type of way or wanted to be a content creator, well, BuzzFeed was the place to work at. And BuzzFeed knew this, and they got pretty cocky. BuzzFeed essentially exploited people that were hungry to work in the industry. One of the employees that was fired from BuzzFeed posted a blog essentially exposing how a lot of the listicles posted on BuzzFeed's site were all made by unpaid contributors. One student from Michigan was the runner-up for the most amount of traffic brought to the website with her listicles. It's estimated that she brought in around $3.8 million worth of revenue to BuzzFeed. What did she get in return? An Amazon gift card, a BuzzFeed hoodie, and a BuzzFeed water bottle. That's fucking it. BuzzFeed knew that these people were desperate to work at their company, so they really took advantage of it, and nothing really showcases this better than the video where they had people drink their own pee for the very first time. Yes, that's a real video. And the people that were in this video were all interns that were trying to get a job at BuzzFeed full time. But soon enough, BuzzFeed no longer became the dream place to work at after loads of people dropped their Why I Left BuzzFeed videos. In the span of like 1 year, loads of people started telling their stories of why they departed from the company. Some reasons were not really so dramatic, some definitely were. Some people simply left the company because it wasn't really a good fit, and honestly, that's pretty reasonable. Sometimes you just don't fit in at the place that you work, and that makes sense. A lot of people left BuzzFeed because they wanted to work on their own YouTube channel. If you worked at BuzzFeed, then you weren't really allowed to post your own content because it would be a conflict of interest. Which sounds a little messed up, but that actually is a pretty common practice in the entertainment industry. And so a lot of people like Michelle Carr left for that reason, which again, makes sense. You want to be your own boss and you want to work on your own thing. But then there were some people that posted videos that had pretty concerning reasons. At BuzzFeed's peak, they were producing content non-stop. They were posting like every day on the main channel and also posting like every day on their many side channels. High quality content that was expected to go viral. And that means that meeting quotas can be very hard. When you're under pressure to make these really good videos all the time, that can really be exhausting and cause a lot of burnout, which is essentially what happened to a lot of employees. They felt overworked and just simply couldn't take it anymore.
There are many different types of videos that you make at BuzzFeed. And not only are there a lot of different types of videos that get made, but there are a lot of videos that get made all the time. I started to realize that to BuzzFeed, in a lot of cases, quantity trumps quality. They would rather have more videos than fewer good videos. And the reasoning behind this, I think, is just that the more videos you make, the more money you make, generally. And there was also a focus on virality. The videos you make are expected to go viral. Not all of them, but ideally a lot of them. And, you know, that's a lot of pressure. And what that means is that sometimes you might make some videos that you don't really enjoy because you want to hit those benchmarks. You want to get 1 million views. You want to get a ton of shares on Facebook. Especially as an intern and a fellow, you're expected to make a lot of hit videos. It's competitive, right? If you don't do a good job, then you're not going to get the producer position. And because of that, a lot of producers, when they finally get there, are burnt out. You know, every waking hour of their time for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months was devoted to, okay, how can I make the video that's going to do the best on YouTube?
The thing about being a content creator for BuzzFeed is that if you made content, then they owned it. The people who made content for BuzzFeed were basing a lot of this content off of their own personal lives, not just some made-up character. So basically, the network would own almost anything that you made, even after hours, which is kind of scary and weird when you think about it. They basically owned everything that was attached to you. Employees leaving, entire shows were leaving too. The Try Guys and Unsolved Mysteries eventually would depart from BuzzFeed as a whole, which is not so good because that essentially was BuzzFeed's bread and butter. When the contract for the Try Guys was up and it was time for renew, they were not being offered the money from BuzzFeed that they felt like they deserved.
Quite frankly, they didn't want to pay us enough.
So they made a new channel, took the name, and got 1 million subscribers in the first week. The same thing happened with Unsolved Mysteries. The host essentially wanted to have more creative freedom, so they basically left and made a new network called Watcher. And again, big hit. The reasons for why all the creative people left was basically the same. They wanted more money and they wanted more creative power. BuzzFeed usually was so adoptive to creative innovation, but now that just suddenly changed for some reason. Their ideas became bland. They highly prioritized profit. seeing their creative talent that really gave the show life as simply just replaceable employees is a really bad way to look at them. So many of the people that left BuzzFeed went on to create bigger and better things than what they made on BuzzFeed. Michelle Carr started the Challenge Accepted series and got over 6 million subs. Sophia Nygaard made her own YouTube channel and got over 10 million subs. The most notable one easily is Quinta Brunson, who wrote, starred, and created the show Abbott Elementary, which is an award-winning series. By the way, it's also an amazing show I highly recommend. Watcher and the Try Guys were also still very, very successful after they left BuzzFeed. Yeah, I know the Try Guys had the whole scandal of Ned cheating on his wife, and the Watcher basically betrayed their fans by having that quick little cash grab subscription bullshit. But if you look at any video that they posted recently, it has more views than any of the videos that BuzzFeed has posted in the last month combined, so they're still doing pretty decently well. I mean, even some of the people that were fired from BuzzFeed for reasonable causes were also doing a lot better. Like even Benny Johnson, who was fired for plagiarism, quite literally became a well-respected political commentator on YouTube. This is what started to have a real effect on BuzzFeed's views. Their main channel was now getting less and less engagement, and the views were going down pretty bad. The same content ideas that worked in the early 2010s were just not really working anymore. Back then, it worked well with the trends, but now it felt stale and corporate. Now that BuzzFeed didn't really have any personality attached to their content, it just felt boring. And they weren't really pushing any new ideas or trying anything new in the slightest. And other sections of BuzzFeed were really suffering too. BuzzFeed News, which at one point was an award-winning news site, now suddenly had the reputation of being extremely unreliable. And the rising political shift, BuzzFeed suddenly became very obviously biased. In 2016, there was a report that went through 100 of the articles that BuzzFeed wrote about Obama. They found that 65 of them were positive, 34 were neutral, and only one of them was actually critical in some type of way. They deemed that BuzzFeed's report on Obama was creepy and very clearly was biased in his favor and actually lacked any type of criticism whatsoever. But that same exact year, BuzzFeed published a 35 dossier report on Donald Trump claiming that Russia had compromising info on him, and also said that Trump was in contact with these Russian aides and also alleged sexual conduct. None of these were verified at all, but BuzzFeed published them as factual, which isn't good. You can't publish allegations like that as factual, it's just simply bad journalism. It's against integrity no matter whose side you're on. BuzzFeed was pretty quick to some big topics, like they were the first ones to post the Kevin Spacey allegations. Public didn't really see them as a news source. In 2017, BuzzFeed had to fire 100 staff because they were 15 to 20% short behind revenue. They would raise revenue by 15% next year, but BuzzFeed was still losing money and they were getting desperate. They launched a cookware line at Walmart. They dropped a toy store in Manhattan, but it wasn't working, and by 2019 they had to fire over 200 staff, which was 15% of the company at this point. And eventually they had to shut down BuzzFeed News as a whole because they couldn't afford to keep it up. By 2020, their average views were a tenth of what it used to be 5 years ago, but it was about to get so much worse. Now BuzzFeed was still worth money, about $1.5 billion worth money. In a desperate yet strategic move, BuzzFeed decided to become an open company and acquire Complex Network. You guys are probably familiar with them. They're like the hip-hop and sneakerhead version of BuzzFeed, so it makes sense why they would acquire them. That's two very fitting companies. But this whole thing fell off hard before shit even started. Now BuzzFeed was going to buy Complex for $300 million, and they were getting $287 million from investors. But just 4 days before BuzzFeed went public, investors decided to pull out, and they only got $16.2 million in investments, which is a pretty big decrease and caused a lot of problems. BuzzFeed thought they had all the money to buy Complex, but they didn't. But it was too late to turn back. BuzzFeed went public with an IPO of $10 a share. Yet in the first week alone, the price fell to $5.80 a share, which is a 42% decrease. By 2023, their shares were worth under $1, which pissed off NASDAQ. They were given $180 to raise the stock above $1, or else it would be taken off the stock market as a whole. Shocker, they weren't able to bring it up because no one watched BuzzFeed anymore. So they were given another 180 days, but that didn't work either. By 2024, their stock dropped 98%. The company was now worth $37 million instead of the $1.5 billion, and they had a shitload of debt from the Complex deal. The very thing that they thought would save the company just further accelerated their downfall. Like, this possibly couldn't have gone any worse than it did, but it did. They were so desperate they did a 4-to-1 reverse stock split, which was able to temporarily put them back on the stock market. But at the time, they had to sell Complex already. So after only 3 years of owning it, they sold Complex for $103 million, which is a pretty big decrease from the $300 million that they bought it for. They were able to sell Hot Ones, which is the YouTube channel on First We Feast, which is technically owned by Complex, which was owned by BuzzFeed, for $82.5 million. But guess what? That's still nearly a $100 million loss from the deal. During this sale, they announced even more layoffs, this time 16% of the company. It's at this point that BuzzFeed is so desperate and trying to recreate the success that they once had. But they're trying to deal their way out rather than maybe focusing on what made the company so good in the first place. Through creating original and innovative content, fueling authenticity, and being the voice of an era. Rather, instead, they try catering way too much to rage bait, not learning from their mistakes, and simply banking on the typical repeatable formula until hopefully it catches up, which it won't. With nearly 20 million subs, they're unable to break 100,000 views on one video, which is pretty damn sad. So at this point, it's obvious that they need to throw in the towel. The faces that once helped BuzzFeed now have gone their separate ways. The silly listicles that were once cute in the 2010s have all been replaced by TikTok. The content that they try to sell the audience now is very obviously forced. BuzzFeed had it all at one point, but now their time is done and need to accept it. Seeing the sharp decline in revenue, the lack of investors, and the very high rise of debt, it's gonna be an amazing miracle if BuzzFeed is still able to keep the lights on in the office in the next couple of years.